I used to think that marketing was most effective when you needed the consumer to do it. You had a not very important distinction, and you needed the consumer to make a small behavioural change. So, in other words, I'll have cornflakes rather than grape nuts. Okay,
Yeah.
move your hand a foot to the left. Advertising's pretty good at that, and it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And I used to think that if you had a really, really big idea, you didn't need marketing because it sold itself. Then I realized that when you have a really, really big idea requires a lot of behavioral change, which creates a lot of psychological friction. And so, perfect proof point of this, okay? The best idea anybody's ever had. I think we can debate it, okay? But the best idea any single person's ever had is probably the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah.
It took them 50 years to get full acceptance, okay,
Yeah.
from Jenner coming up with the idea. Massive psychological resistance, institutional resistance, religious opposition, okay. Really big ideas require a lot of marketing because they require a lot of people to change their minds.
Yeah.
And you can see where it works well. Same-sex marriage was a kind of triumph for fairly rapid, consensual change. Handled absolutely brilliantly. On the other hand, say drink driving norms. That was probably a 50-year. My parents didn't drink drive, but their contemporaries did. That kind of thing. But really big important ideas, I used to think sold themselves, and I've now realised it's completely the opposite. That the bigger the idea, the more effort you need to make.
Yeah.
The opposition to the car is absolutely fascinating, by the way. My distant cousin Woodrow Wilson, when he was, I think, president of Princeton, he wrote this piece saying nothing is doing more to foster socialism in the United States than the automobile. This naked display of ostentatious wealth is basically turning people, against the wealthy. And there was this whole period where the car, which I would also argue is a pretty sodding good idea, okay? You can now travel at 50 miles an hour rather than 3. The mobile phone, okay? I can remember when loads of people said, why would I want to make a phone call on the street? When I used a mobile phone on Oxford Street in 1989, 2 people shouted abuse at me from passing cars.
Yeah.
So this idea that, you have a big idea, it won't need any marketing, it'll take care of itself. Absolutely the opposite of the truth.
Let's talk about cars, because I think it's interesting reflection of how possibly society has changed in the last 20 or 30 years or so, right? And we can come on to Jaguar as well. But it used to be that we lived in a very individualistic world. People would personalise the back of their cars, you'd have bumper stickers, etc. Now, the vast majority of cars are basically black, silver, or blue.
Grey,
Yeah, and I just find it a really strange.
Very interestingly, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the electric Mustang, and indeed the petrol Mustang, are going counter-trend on that, and they're realising that actually there's a segment of the population. There's a whole extraordinary study on why that happened. A little bit of it is resale value, that cars were sold on this kind of, lease hire agreement, okay. The car dealer is obliged to take back the car at a set price after 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you order a car in pink, which you can technically do, you'll come across massive resistance because they know that they'll be lumbered with a pink car in 4 years' time, and the resale problem is theirs, not yours. Okay.
Yeah.
But there is something rather tragic about it. By the way, the sort of I'm not interested in cars phenomenon is very much confined to kind of London, New York,
Yes.
places where there's huge public transport. By the way, I also think there's something rather important, which is if you don't drive fairly frequently, driving isn't very enjoyable. It's actually quite stressful.
Yeah.
And I know that because whenever I pick up a hire car from the airport, which is an unfamiliar car, the first few hours I spend driving in it, I'm on edge.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's my own car and I drive it every day, it's actually joyously enjoyable.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in London, not only is driving in London horrible, but the people in London don't drive very frequently, so they also hate driving.
Yeah.
And so you get this kind of feedback effect where central London basically creates non-drivers.
Yeah.
Because I imagine if you haven't driven for 3 months and you take the train to Reading and you pick up a car from Avis, okay, the first hour of your driving, even if you were previously a reasonably experienced driver, is pure tenterhooks.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is once you move out of London and you drive every day, if only to the station, okay, it becomes system one and it becomes a flow state.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the interesting things about research into happiness, when they look at people's sort of happiness and well-being minute by minute, is how much people enjoy driving, which is something, by the way, which I don't think the driverless car movement has fully clocked, which is that we like a feeling of control.